Theme number 2, managing resistance to change. Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, "The only thing constant is change." There should be no surprise when a manager encounters employees, peers, or even senior leaders in the organization who react to change with shock and fear. One thing that has not changed enough over time is people's ability to deal with change, whether that means being proactive and responding with action versus mind-numbing surprise. There are several ways to ensure individuals across the organization are more prepared for change. They help minimize the impact and potential resistance when it appears. Carly's story. She barely made it to her car before the tears came too quickly for one tissue to absorb. An unplanned end-of-day meeting had just ended 10 minutes earlier, in which Carly and her peers found out that their company, Cooper's, a popular department store in the Midwest and Eastern United States, was going to be acquired by Retail City, an even more popular one-stop shop retail store out west. Although Carly had only been a VP at Cooper's for the last 2 years, she felt like she was part of the family their culture instilled. An almost 50-year-old family business, and during her first few days with the organization, she instantly knew this was the place for her. She felt like she fit in, was respected, and cared for by her manager, her peers, and the employees. Carly knew the next few weeks were going to be the hardest to overcome. She had to first figure out how to accept the reality of the acquisition and try to calm the fears of what that might mean. When she got to work the next morning, she closed her office door, took out a fresh notepad, and wrote down the following: reasons why this change might be a good thing. Underneath, she began the list with increase awareness of both brands across the United States. Tapping her pen to her forehead, she then proceeded to add potential job growth or change. At that moment, her face crinkled up and she couldn't stop the thought of just the opposite, potential job loss. What if? She thought, and then quickly opened her desk drawer, dropped the notepad in, and slammed the door shut. She jumped out of her chair, deciding a nice cup of coffee might help decrease that devil's advocate from stomping all over her list of reasons why the acquisition might just be a good thing. During the prior Friday meeting, Carly's boss, Mike, told her and her peers that within 1 week, the announcement of the acquisition would be public. All the employees at Cooper's and Retail City would find out only a couple hours before the press release was sent and the world knew. Between now and then, the hard work would be starting to figure out what the acquisition meant and how the management team might be able to calm employees' fears and help them see the potential in this change. Carly knew she had to figure out more items to add to the list she had started if she was going to be even half convincing to anyone else when news release day came. The next day, Carly was meeting with one of her peers, Gwen, in her office. They started to talk about the news, and Gwen was filled with excitement over the possibilities this held for both companies. Carly pulled out her notepad and told Gwen about the list she was trying to build, in part because she herself was skeptical about what good may come from this huge change. Gwen proceeded to share an experience from 3 years before, when she was a VP of operations at another retailer, and they decided to merge with a smaller retailer to increase their product selection. As expected, Gwen shared there had been anxiety and worry on behalf of both companies' employees, but everything turned out for the best. Fears were alleviated when employees at both companies were evaluated for their strengths, and it was determined that some functions needed centralization, such as human resources and sales. This didn't necessarily mean a cut to staff in those areas, though. As the HR and training teams identified the strengths among all employees within these groups, they realized the need for those strengths in other areas for the new combined company to realize results. Yes, some employees were not happy with the process or changes and decided to leave the company, but that was helpful in that no one else needed to be let go. Carly looked down at her list when Gwen took a breath and decided to add 2 more reasons to her list. Use of employee strengths across existing or possibly new teams, and natural attrition for those uncomfortable with the change. Later that afternoon, with the notepad still on her desk, Carly thought of one more to add. Different cultures merging. Possible to take the best of both worlds? She now had a total of 5 items on her reasons why this change might be a good thing list. Increase awareness of both brands across the United States. Potential job growth or change. Use of employees' strengths across existing or possibly new teams. Natural attrition for those uncomfortable with the change. Different cultures merging. Possible to take the best of both worlds. It was well past 6 p.m., and Carly knew her husband would be waiting for her to arrive for dinner in the next half hour. Once again, she opened her desk drawer and placed the notepad in it. This time, as she did so, she was beginning to think this whole acquisition might not be as bad as she initially thought. Thankfully, Carly was right. The acquisition happened, and although there were a few bumps along the way, the outcome was overall positive for the organization and its employees. There were employees that were ready for retirement and had the chance to take advantage of it, and others that could move into another area of the company based on their skill sets and the company's needs. Reflection questions. Number 1. Why do you think Carly decided to create her reasons why this change might be a good thing list? Would this approach have helped you if you were in a situation like hers? Number 2. Gwen talked about her prior experience and how it turned out to be something beneficial to the companies that merged. What similarities and differences are there between Gwen's prior experience and what Coopers and Retail City are getting ready to go through? How could that impact the outcome? 3. How could Carly's leadership team have further involved her ahead of time so that the change was not what felt like a sudden change to her? Quote from Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. Tips and best practices for managing resistance to change. Number 1, set the expectation that change is inevitable. It matters most how we react. To help minimize the resistance to change, it is healthy for managers to ensure their team members know that change is constant, and the only way to have any control over it is to be prepared and ready to act. Employees' awareness of their role in the organization, the state of the industry and economy, and the organization's importance and impact overall are potential indicators of what may happen. Long gone are the days of working for an organization for 20 plus years. Employers must open themselves up to new opportunities and learn how to be somewhat comfortable with ambiguity. In a world of never-ending change, it is so important to advocate for oneself and take control where possible. Number 2, involve employees in the change. Communicating with employees prior to, during, and after the change will decrease the likelihood of employee resistance as management has worked to build a level of trust and understanding. This is not to say there will not be any resistance, but these types of steps and involvement have been known to help minimize shock and fear and allow the change to occur a bit smoother than otherwise possible. Adam's story from the previous chapter provides a better example of being able to openly communicate with employees and ensure they had awareness of what was being done and considered throughout the process, as well as what the future impact would be based on the results of those actions. In this chapter's story, Carly was in a tough spot, as employees were not allowed to be made aware until a few hours prior to the press release. What may have been the result if employees were aware of the acquisition much earlier in the process? Is there any way Carly could have talked with her manager about being able to make this happen? Number 3, think about resistance to change from downsized employees, surviving employees, and other managers' perspectives. As a manager, put yourself in your employee's shoes, whether they have been identified both as someone who will be let go or will stay. Think about the worries and the challenges that each will face. Consider the opportunities that appear because of their fate. One participant in my dissertation noted this and related to a downsized employee's perspective. How do you know that this one person wasn't sitting at a barbecue with his best friend on Saturday and said, if I ever got laid off, I'd flip the freaking table over or I'd piss on their desk? How do you know that it doesn't happen? You can just never take anything for granted, and I don't try to ever ask why they acted that way. You just accept it. Honestly, I don't know what I would do. People cry, they get emotional, walk out. I could be one of those people that just get up and leave. Think also through the lens of an employee who survived a downsizing. There could be feelings of relief that they still have a position and will not have to experience a significant life change. Feelings of anger and that their friends or family were let go, or due to the amount of work that they may be left to handle. Or, more likely, a mixture of both relief, anger, fear, and numerous other emotions. After looking at the roles from different perspectives, think about what opportunities a manager has in preparing employees for potential changes, including improving communication. What more can a manager learn from their employees prior to, during, or after an organizational change? How could that alter the way managers interact when there is no sign of change on the line?